The people of Atrox City don't understand what it takes to keep them sleeping safely at night. The thin veneer of society masks the darkness that gnaws at the edges of their soft, easy lives. Criminals, the scum of the earth, they're always waiting, hungry at the door. I don the mantle of the cassowary in their name. Without me, there would be chaos, death, and destruction. I am justice. I am order. I am the one who will do what is necessary. I am the Wing. You can read my story in Tales of Nihilism at globalcomics.com.
Hello everyone and welcome. A movie just recently came out and we think that this movie is the final chapter of an era. And we're going to talk about it today. We're doing something completely different today. Normally I have like a subject matter and it's scripted. There's no script for this, and this is going to be a little bit, it's almost going to be like a podcast recording. We're just going to have ourselves a little discussion between us two people. It's sort of like the MAARs summit, but a little more focused. So, so I'm Mike, and with me today is...
Stephen Russell from Tales of Nihilism.
Also known as Salty Skipper. So if you see his stuff, Salty Skipper. This is Mike's After Action Reviews, and this is a discussion about the Sonyverse, whatever it's called. There you go. So guys, as you could tell by the ad in the beginning of the video, this video is sponsored, and it is sponsored by none other than our guest, Stephen Russell, Salty Skipper, Tales of Nihilism. Before we get into things, why don't you kind of tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself? People have seen you before, but tell us about Tales of Nihilism. We got an event coming up.
Yeah, so Stephen Russell, author, artist. I've written my memoir about my deployment to Iraq in 2006 in Bakuba. It's called Troublemakers, the Greatest Dog and Pony Show on Earth. And my main project is I am the artist and story concept writer for Tales of Nihilism that we digitally publish on Global Comics. And it's an anthology series that we have short stories and like comic strips and funnies, and then our main flagship series is called The Ballad of Philip Kirshner, and it's about a normal guy, and he lives in a world full of superheroes, and it shows you just how difficult and like horrific and crazy it would be to exist as, you know, an average guy in that world.
Yeah, and I'll also say we've talked about this before. The idea behind it is kind of, don't rely on superheroes. Don't rely on the heroes in your life. That's kind of the subtext.
There's a definite theme that, of hero worship and stuff like that. That's, born out from my own experiences and watching, societal reactions to things like, the war in Iraq and other things that went on in my life. I'm also pulling a lot from the difficulties of transitioning into civilian life as a veteran, and that idea of how difficult the world already is. And then you put these other things on top of it that we kind of like have this rose tinted glasses, view of things, and then you see the reality and you're like, oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I like the idea of the series as far as, like if superheroes were real, you can't rely on superheroes, you can't rely on transition that idea to real life. Like, you can't rely on the government. You can't rely on your mom. You can't rely on your dad. You got to do this stuff for yourself. We've talked about this kind of my own idea here. When growing up, I was really into superheroes. Didn't have a whole lot of positive role models, but being able to look at a character that is a superhero as an idealized person, it's like Captain America. You know, I want to be not. I don't want to be necessarily Captain America, but I want to be true. I want to be brave. I want to be strong. I think that the way that you're looking at it, the way the comic book is looking at it, if superheroes were real, it's true that you wouldn't. Even if Captain America was real, even if whoever Thor, the Avengers were real, you can't rely on them to fix all your problems, and there would be issues that they come up with. On the flip side, superheroes as a fantasy work for people to be able to look at an idealized version of their own values and try to live up to them. So I think that those two ideas complement each other rather than
I think
oppose each other. Yeah.
I think kind of our different, me and my writer, our different pathway with it is that we don't just say, like, you can't rely on superheroes for everything. We almost come to the conclusion in this series that superheroes are more harmful to society than they are good. Like, and not even just the superheroes, but the superhero and supervillain dynamic and all these other things. And we have this kind of like theme throughout the 8 issues that there are all these other things that are not being taken care of in society and not being addressed because everyone expects the whole superhero and the system to play out the way it's supposed to.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree that I agree that, like you said, so it would be a greater bad to have something where people start to just basically just say, well, superheroes, so it's fine.
Yeah. Just as an example, in one of our issues, we have like a whole area where like the police are shown to be completely inept in taking care of things. And, none of it's like to badmouth police. It's to like say, hey, there's these superheroes that exist. And so why would police decide to start, doing their job or, investigating and stuff like that? And the institution as it is already like faulty and has enough problems as it is. Now, if you have the excuse of a superhero, okay, well, it just gets even worse and worse.
Sorry, that's my kids playing around in the hallway. Don't worry, they're not hurting themselves or anything. It's my daughter's in plastic high heels. Yeah, so I just to compliment. But see, I'm still saying I totally agree. I would just to compliment that. So then the way that I would look at that is that if you are a police officer, just to use the same idea, then the police should be saying to themselves, instead of that's I think that it's created when you think of superheroes. If superheroes were real, I think that problem is created. I think the fantasy of superheroes is still complements that idea, because because a police officer would say, well, I want to be the best, just like Batman. I want to be. I don't want to have the problems that you're describing because I want to be like the superhero. Now, if superheroes were real, it would be like, well, whatever, there's a superhero, so who cares? So I think that the two ideas actually complement each other, and coming in as a fan of superheroes, it's a great idea. Yeah. And that's why we have shows like The Boys and things like that as well. It's a similar thing, not exactly the same, but a similar. Yeah. But okay. I think that The Boys, my understanding, I haven't read the comic of The Boys, but my understanding is that The Boys was not written the greatest for people who like superheroes. So,
they tried. To me, I appreciate The Watchmen a lot more than I do The Boys. The Boys takes this idea of like power corrupts and corrupts absolutely. So there aren't going to be any good superheroes. They're all just a part of these political plays and all these other things going on. Whereas you kind of miss out on the nuances and faults of like just normal human beings and our experiences in life with that. You're still kind of like going into this whole like things are good and things are bad and this really black and white, mentality with that. Whereas the Watchmen were like really, really riding that gray line of like these people were stopping world-ending events and doing all these other things, but at the same time there's like these institutional things happening in the background that makes it to where like what they're doing is still morally fallible but still in a good way, is and so I try to keep more in that vein, because I'm like I want to kind of it's called Tales of Nihilism, so we're implanting like philosophical ideas and things in there,
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, cool. So then let's kind of transition here. So talking about the idea of superheroes, I totally agree with what you're doing. I think it's a great thing. And then again on the flip side of that, it's modern mythology. You tell yourself the story of, I don't know, like actually Thor is a superhero, but Vikings used to tell themselves the story of great warriors that would die in battle, and the Valkyrie would come, and there was Odin, and there was Thor, and they represented these aspects in life, and I think superheroes basically are that now. And so today we're going to transition here and talk about kind of modern superhero properties. So we've had the MCU.
Yeah.
The MCU has been doing just absolutely terribly. I think that they've totally given up. I don't think that the MCU represents the ideas that Tales of Nihilism does. And I don't think that the MCU I also don't think that I basically think that the MCU has failed, is trying but failing to live up to the values of Golden Age comics of, like Superman was America, use your might during World War II. Captain America is the man that is pure of heart and just trying to do a good thing. Spider-Man is with great power comes great responsibility. And now these movies have just evolved into, there's a lot of political subtext I don't think should belong. Some cultural subtext is okay, but I'm saying some of these things are starting to leak in, and then you just have low quality filmmaking in general.
It depends, and political stuff is always going to be like where you are in that moment and who created what and things. I think really what the MCU has done is not like, given up on this. It's not really this golden age, hero stuff. All of that's kind of like DC. Marvel Comics, or the MCU, stopped being Marvel Comics, because Marvel Comics was always about the different hero, the different people. Everything was about inclusion and about diversity and about, you're telling these stories about people who have problems. Spider-Man is not just a teenage, he's not just a superhero with powers. He's also a teenager, and he has to go through like normal teenager stuff, and he's getting bullied. And at the same time, he's like, I can't like just go crazy at school because I'm, this thing, and I have a responsibility. So Marvel's always like hit that. X-Men was huge on like, we're going to show stories about different people, and so Marvel was always about those different walks of life and those different types of people. And the X-Men is like a play on in the 60s and 70s and all the like civil rights and the racial strife going on in America. And like it's why X-Men 97 hit harder than any cinematic movie, any X-Men cinematic movie they've had. Everything in Marvel 97 was true to that idea and what it was trying to establish. And Magneto's speech to the UN in that comment, in a cartoon series, hit
Yeah.
harder and was more deep than anything that you've gotten out of the MCU movies, right?
Right.
You
Well,
know?
so something that I've always said is that I mean, politics is downwind from culture.
Mhm. Yeah.
Everybody agrees about certain things, like murder's bad, um, racism is bad, sexism is bad. Okay, sexism is bad. But so the idea of the X-Men saying, "Don't be racist," okay, great.
Mhm.
The idea of the idea of saying like, hey, equality, like meritocracy. Okay, I think that's a
Yeah.
big thing too. Is equity versus meritocracy. I go one way and not the other. But my idea that I've always said is what you should be able to do is put yourself in the like listening to the two arguments. You shouldn't be able to see. How do I describe this? It's like Magneto doesn't equal politician A. He doesn't
Yeah, of
equal
course.
politician B. What he equals is idea of bad. Like this
Yeah.
idea, this represents a thing. So one thing that I didn't like in the MCU was when Captain America Falcon, who is wearing Captain America's suit
Yeah.
and using his shield, when he says like, you have to be better, and these people who've blown up buildings and killed children and everything, they're not, stop calling them terrorists. And it's like, that's so overtly saying this group of people is evil. And what should instead be happening is you should be able to take your beliefs, like Democrat, Republican, Socialist, Conservative, Chinese, American, African, English. These people should be able to take their values and put
Yeah.
themselves in the place of the X-Men and go, I
Yeah.
believe in that. They should be able to
But,
take
I mean,
themselves and... Oh, go on.
In that specific instance, though, that's a lot of where American culture and politics is today. People recognize politicians, whether they're Democrats, whether they're Republicans, whether they're far left or far right. They're all liars, thieves, and they've created this institution that is morally corrupt and just doesn't work at all. So you have these weird like inputs in these shows at different times, and yes, there are times where they're trying to like push something so hard where you're like you've lost, and that's always my issue, is like you've lost the ability to tell a story anymore. Like, we're here to watch a story,
Right.
and it's in some cases be entertained. In some cases we want to take something from it, or we appreciate it in different ways. But at the end of the day, it's still a story. Like the whole, what was it? I'm sorry, I'm blanking. The Echo, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I get, this is a villain story with villain characters and this whole arc and stuff. And that part is even they're like, hey, let's put in Native American culture and tell these stories about Native Americans and like play with these ideas. Even that's really cool. Like, I'm all about that kind of stuff. But when you have it so much that it's like, well, we have to represent deaf people, and we have to do it to the point that the first 2 episodes are almost completely silent. There's no conversations going on. You're like, I can't even, sit back and just like turn it on, or, I have to read this thing. So if I want to have the show in the background while I'm cooking or, doing this, I can't do that. I have to be sitting down and reading this story online, because even the characters who aren't deaf don't have speaking lines. And you're just like,
right.
And I've had deaf friends.
It gets annoying.
You don't interact with them like that. Like, you still speak, and they read your lips, and you're trying to do pieces of sign language and stuff like that. I'm all about inclusion. I'm all about bringing in different people and telling different stories, but let's not like kneecap a plot and the whole story to where it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
Same
and I
thing
would
with
say
Star Wars.
Oh, go on. Sorry.
Same thing with Star Wars. You know, I was so excited to see what was it, the Acolyte. I was hyped for that. I wanted to see a dark side perspective story. I wanted to see what it was like, you know, for somebody to go into the dark side, to fall, to, you know, have all these issues going on. And even during the time when the Republic is supposed to be at its height and its most strongest, I was excited for that. Yeah. But they just completely trashed and walked all over that story and just like could not tell a good story at all. You're opening up with the first episode in that series, and just stupid things like, okay, they've had a Jedi who was killed at a bar. She got murdered by this unknown assassin. You go and fly all the way to the bar. You interview the bartender. You think you know who your suspect is. It's an old, Jedi, candidate. So what do? You take someone from off-world. You transport them to this ship to have them in person point out and finger your suspect that you think just murdered a Jedi in cold blood. Like, there's no common sense in the story right there. Right?
Well, and that's actually... So I think two things that you just brought up are, one, subtlety. So I think that the idea, see, that's what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with the idea of don't treat women badly. But when you have Captain Marvel beat up a guy and steal his motorcycle because he said, hey, why don't you stop scowling and maybe smile a little bit? That's ridiculous. So there's no subtlety there, and it turns, okay, and the other thing that you're saying is lore breaking, like people trying to say that Captain Marvel is the most powerful Avenger, even though Marvel itself, if you go look on their website, you can see the numbers, and it's like strength, speed, energy projection. They're all the same for Thor, everything is the same for Thor and Captain Marvel, except Thor's strength and speed are higher. So it's like clearly... you're trying to break lore to push. And that's what I think happened with it turned into Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I keep saying that, but it's Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Yeah, that's what happened with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Is they tried to push some ideas, and it's obviously open borders. They tried to push an open borders idea so hard that they broke. Not just lore, but they kind of made it where it made no sense. It's like if it doesn't work and like people are starting to die from resource problems, like we've got to make some changes.
There's a whole interesting story behind that. Again, like they completely decided to throw away the story and the plot.
The interesting story, yeah.
Yeah, like everybody wanted to know, like, okay, if we're gonna get into these ideas and stuff, what happened post blip, and then how are these people dealing with it, and then when everybody comes back after the blip, that's huge. How do you reintegrate people back into society? Like, is your social security card, like, is that gonna work now? Or are you gonna be able to? What was going on? Your bank, all this kind of stuff, like. Yeah, those are huge, huge issues that an Avenger can't solve, right? And those are very interesting stories to tell. But instead, we have to do it that way that just completely brushes out on those things.
Yeah, and the point that and to clarify my point as well, kind of clarify exactly what I'm saying here is, you could have had the same thing. You could have had Falcon, who's now the new Captain America. You could have had him advocate, for for open borders. I mean, you straight up could have had him advocate for some of these things that these terrorist organizations, and you could have had him empathize with the terrorist organizations in a certain way through subtlety. Like, you could have said to the politicians, maybe we need to sit down with these people who have these concerns and talk about it. Maybe there's something, just whatever, but it's like through subtlety. And if you say to me, well, why don't you write it? I'm not a writer, but I can point to you back when Captain America was fighting the Nazis. Yeah, what's that?
because they haven't called me yet.
Yeah, that's the thing. But I'm not a writer, so I probably wouldn't be able to write the good story. Okay, Stephen Russell, Tales of Nihilism, he is the writer, so he could do this. But I'm just saying, if you look back at when the Avengers comic books first came out, when you look back at when the X-Men comics first came out, those guys knew how to do exactly what we're talking about. And you as a modern day writer should be able to do it too.
Well, no, I mean you're talking to. There's a different setup, functionality with writing rooms and shows and things like that as well. You have issue of like way too many hands in the cookie jars, too many chefs in the kitchen kind of thing going on. Whereas like in Marvel, if you were a writer for, the Amazing Spider-Man series, you were the writer for the Amazing Spider-Man series.
Right.
Like
and
you
now
wrote
we have
the art.
yeah.
You were the one, and there may have been an editing, an editor and like a team of people that would check and like be like, hey, this goes against continuity, or like this is going on, but at the end of the day, you're the one that they said you're going to decide what happens to Spider-Man, and you're going to write this for the next 20 issues, and then maybe we'll change to a new writer, and then he'll write a story or she'll write a story, and it on and on. Here, in the whole MCU debacle, you have a room full of like 20 people, and everybody wants their piece of their writing style in this show. They want their name, their mark, their thing in here, and you just can't do these kind of projects like that. Like, you have to have a clear cut like goal and idea of where this is going to start, middle, and end, and how things are going to go through it. And then you do need somebody in there who's like, hey, this is continuity. In this show going over here, they just, finished filming. They said A, B, and C. And here we're saying the exact opposite. So we need to revise that and talk through that.
Yeah. No, and I agree. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that the MCU has been doing pretty terribly because, like I said, they've just lost their luster. The first Avengers movie, it first of all, see, that's what I'm saying again, and we're basically now we're starting to get to where we're just agreeing and maybe saying some things over again. But just to clarify about the Avengers here, no political ideology was in that movie, but cultural ideas. Think about who Captain America is. Think about what the Hulk represents. Think about Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow. Think about what those people are. So you have the rich helping the needy, Tony Stark. You have a man with serious internal struggles trying to control the monster within himself, the Hulk. You have maybe we need a little bit of the old-fashioned Captain America. You have female empowerment, Black Widow, and Black Widow never in that movie stood up and said, "I am a woman and we can get it done." You didn't need to. You didn't need to because that was there, but we didn't need to ruin the story by having that kind of thing. And so I do want to transition into our main topic today. So these movies that we're going to talk about, I'm going to do a quick run through of what we're talking about. So we're talking about Sony's Spider-Man verse, but a lot of people just call it the Sonyverse, and we'll get into why. I don't think that these movies even have any of the arguments that we just talked about, but I do think that they are a symptom of some of the things that we're talking about when it comes to, especially like you're saying, with a writer's room.
They do have that issue, but they also have an extra layer of added bullshit on top of them, which is the whole legality and the intellectual property rights and what they're allowed to show in their stuff versus what the MCU and Disney are allowed to show in their stuff, and who's going to lease this character out and that, and vice versa, and all that crap.
Well, I will say it's kind of like Dave Chappelle said another thing with the writing. Dave Chappelle said, Twitter's not a place. We have a lot of loud voices. I'm sure that you as a comic book writer know what it means when I say things like, you have people who complain about things being in a comic book, or people who say, why don't you put this in the comic book? But those people don't buy comics, don't read comics, never would have bought it even if that thing was in there. So what ends up happening, I think, is you have a bunch of corporate people who have no idea what culture is, what the culture is, or no idea what different things are, never really read the comics, and they want to make money. So they come in and they say, well, why don't you have, women, we have this kind of cultural thing going on with women right now. Why don't you, it would probably be cool and women would like the movie if we had a woman beat up a guy and steal his motorcycle. How cool would that be? And then they put it in the movie, and then, the movie, that was Captain Marvel. Now, the movie was successful, but I think that it was successful mostly because it was put in between the two movies, Endgame and Infinity War, and then they said you have to see this one, and then it was stupid. You didn't even need to see it. But anyway, and then what happens is when the second movie comes out, it's a huge bomb because everybody saw the first one and said, well, that one sucked. We didn't even like that. Some of those things sucked. So here, I think we have a little bit of that too, because it's like people, like big corporate bigwigs who don't even understand these characters saying, wouldn't it be cool if we did this too? Don't you think that would get in this part of the audience, this part? But those people aren't the audience. So stop trying to do things for them, and then you end up with a bad movie. Okay, so I do want to run through this real quick. Let's just run through this real quick. So the Sony Spider-Verse is composed of 6 movies that were released. There is one that we're going to talk about, and I think the one that it's canceled. I want to talk about this because I think it perfectly exemplifies a lot of what we're talking about. And then there was a comic. There were 2 video games, and there was even an attraction that we can talk about here. So, the 6 movies: Venom from 2018, Venom Let There Be Carnage in 2021, Morbius in 2022, Madam Web 2024, Venom: The Last Dance in 2024, and Kraven the Hunter in 2024. The canceled one is El Muerto. I would actually like to. Well, we can kind of get into that a little later, actually, I think. And then the comic book was Venom from 2018. I never even knew there was a comic book.
No, not for the Spider-Verse type thing. No.
Yeah, and that was just one comic, and it was actually set during the events of the movie, so I think it was kind of trying to capture some things that happened that maybe you didn't get on screen. I don't know, whatever. And then we have 2 video games. So Venom Unleashed and Venom Feed the Beast. So let me tell you about these real quick. We'll get these out of the way, just kind of cover these. So Venom Unleashed was a Snapchat game. It released in 2018, and it was based on the movie Venom. It was like one of those games where your character's like running, and you've got to like move to the left, move to the right, attack to destroy stuff. Okay, and then Venom Feed the Beast is no longer available, but it was a browser game released in 2021, and it's set during the events of Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Yeah, so I mean, let's just I just want to ask you your thoughts, and I'll kind of comment. I try not to. I think it's actually, don't get offended. We're going to so everybody watching, we're really good buddies, actually. Yeah. We know each other. We go way back. What was it, like 8 years ago? We served together in the military. So we're going to interrupt each other and kind of talk over each other, but we're also going to try to let each other finish our thoughts as well. But give me your general thoughts here on the not the MCU. First of all, this doesn't even compare to the MCU, even as bad as the MCU is right now.
Yeah.
I think most of what has come out of the Sonyverse is worse than the MCU, even at its lowest point now. But what's your general idea? Give me your general thoughts on the Sonyverse, and then I want to get into some of the specific movies. But
my thing is, so all of this started with the original Spider-Man, right? Based off the Amazing Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi movies, and he had his 2 that he really knocked out of the park. And by the time we got to Spider-Man 3, I don't know what happened. I don't know if there were some sort of like business things going on. A lot of what I'm talking about with intellectual property rights with certain villains and things like that. I know there was a lot of that going on.
I'll just say studio interference played a huge
Yeah.
thing, because I don't think he wanted just Venom, and I think they wanted Sandman. Like, he
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, get all these guys in here," and he was like, "What?"
And
But anyway,
even
go
then,
on.
like,
Sorry, yeah.
even then, the actor that they chose for Venom and just everything was off. Even though you showed
Topher
Eddie
Grace,
Brock in
yeah.
the first movie, like, yeah. So something happened there where they tripped, and then since then they've been trying to recreate those initial Spider-Man movies, or at least the feelings that people get with those initial Spider-Man movies. But it's almost like no one is in the room to tell them, like, hey guys, you know what's missing from all of these movies? Spider-Man. Like the person who's
Yeah,
important to
that was my
all
big
of these
thought too. Yeah,
stories. But the MCU suffers from that as well, because again, the studio property rights and things like that, because you have Daredevil, you have Kingpin, you have all these other Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, all of these characters are centered around Spider-Man's story and come out of Spider-Man, and he is involved and linked with like almost all these different characters in the Marvel
yeah,
universe. He's almost like a center point for the Marvel universe. And so you take him out of that, and then now you're trying to, build these stories around him, and you're doing it with the worst characters. You are finding like the least important characters to Spider-Man's
yeah,
story, and you are trying to like tell stories that nobody wants to like see. No, nobody would go watch a Craven movie, even if it was the real version of what it's supposed to be, which is The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell in the 20s.
right.
That's what that's based off of. Like, no one would go watch The Most Dangerous Game movie because that's not what they want to consume right now. But you would
Right.
still have a better chance of selling that than you would a Craven movie, because
Right.
nobody, even avid Spider-Man readers like myself, like Craven is a blip in Spider-Man lore. Like,
Yeah.
he's there and then he's gone. Like, okay, what are you talking about? Have a whole movie dedicated to this person. And so that's really, to me, is this whole business studio interference with the Spider-Man deal. You watch all the Spider-Man movies that make it, that are good, they have Spider-Man in them. Even the two Spider-Verse movies, I love those.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up with Miles Morales. That wasn't a Spider-Man character that I was familiar with. I didn't read any of the Miles Morales comics or anything. But I loved that movie, and I thought that, wow, Peter Parker is amazing in this movie, and I love their interaction and this whole story they're telling. Holy crap. So yeah, that's number one. Stop telling Spider-Man stories without Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, now I'm trying to. Did I forget to say it before? But yeah, so the canceled movie is El Muerta or El Muerto, and I
Yeah.
want to just like, so you brought it up first point. I want to bring this up. Okay, have you ever heard of El Muerto?
No.
Okay, so El Muerto. So he was gonna be. So he's a character. He's a superpowered luchador. He puts on a mask and he has superpowers, superhuman strength, superhuman endurance, and he's also a very highly skilled wrestler. I have never heard of this guy.
Yeah.
He was going to be played, and this is another stupid thing. I'm sorry. He was going to be played by Bad Bunny, the rapper. Yeah, like, who wants, and I'm not even, I mean, maybe it would work. Maybe it's not a big deal. Maybe it would work out. But where, like, do you think to yourself, who I really want to see in a superhero movie? Bunny. Excuse me, I'm saying it
Yeah.
totally wrong.
You're good.
Yeah, and just like, I don't know. I'm trying to imagine who. So the idea of having a vampire superhero, Venom getting his own movie, kind of, you get the idea. Like, oh, that's cool, Why though? Like, you say nobody wants to see Kraven the Hunter, and I get it. Yeah, I agree. Like, he's so a lot of these characters were designed to be a foil to solely designed to be a foil to the hero, right? So,
Yeah.
like, it wouldn't make much sense to have a Lex Luthor movie, because what is that going to be? A movie about a guy building a business? Like, like it's going to be like Wolf of Wall Street, like it's,
Unless you're trying to set up like a big bad who's going to be a big bad for a very long time, and you want to give context to that person, like I could get that kind of like the Ant-Man and the Kang, Kang movie, right? Like, yeah, it's an Ant-Man movie, but it's more of a Kang movie to introduce Kang to the audience, who he is, what he's about, and establish him in that way, right?
Yeah, but that's from. Oh, go on.
It's just, to me, he seems more like he's the main character in that movie, because a lot of the things that are going on are more related to Kang and trying to discover Kang and figure him out and like all this other stuff. So you're like, all right, he's really a big presence in that movie that's supposed to be about Ant-Man, right?
Well, but it's from
the Ant-Man stuff.
I just want to say. Yeah, well, I was just going to say, but it's from the perspective of Ant-Man.
Yeah,
I don't think that I don't think it would work for us to have an MCU Thanos movie where it's literally like a movie where it's just Thanos and it's like him going around doing stuff, because then it's I just don't think it would work. I don't think it would work. I think it would be like you'd be. It doesn't come off as him being the big bad. It would come off as him being like this sympathetic, whatever, and then you'd have the goofy parts where you'd start to get rid of the mystery of the character. And without the mystery of the character, you start to have a problem. It's like, that doesn't,
no,
there's just parts of, in order for a villain to work.
That's the only like acceptable thing that I'm seeing, that you make like a villain movie. And to me, it's too like why the Joker 2 failed, right?
Right.
Because the first Joker was the statement. This is the backstory. This is what happened. And it's also not a what you would call like a canon movie. Right, it's not really a comic movie. It's more of an art house philosophical movie through using the Joker. So now when you have a second movie, it's kind of like we didn't really need a second movie. We understood what you were trying to say with the first movie. Like, you don't have to repeat yourself.
And the second movie was, so I didn't see the second one, but my understanding is that it was overindulgent.
Yeah.
Like it was like again, it was kind of like the Falcon and Winter Soldier scene where he's like, you need to be better. So it's like, that's kind of overindulgent. Like, you think you're being cool. You know,
it would have been a really good movie if it wasn't the Joker. Like, because I understood, the kind of story they were trying to tell, because like you said, things are about culture, and they're going back to the 1970s when you have all these serial killers and they are captivating these courtrooms and treating them like a show and things like that. So they're trying to like make this movie about that time in America, but you don't need the Joker to do that. You could have done legit just Ted Bundy or somebody, like the actual thing, right?
Well, Taxi Driver,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, so I do want to say this. So I think that so basically what is that people are saying that the Sonyverse is canceled. It's looking like they're done doing these without Spider-Man, because after Kraven the Hunter. I think that the Venom series, I'm going to tell you guys. So Venom, I'm going to switch over like this. All right, so here's all of this is the
I watched them, but I don't really like them.
Okay, so Venom 41%. Venom: The Last Dance 41%. Okay, Venom Let There Be Carnage 58%. Okay, which I thought was worse than the first one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh wait, what did I do? Okay, so I just want Venom. There you go. Venom, the first one, 30%. Venom Let There Be Carnage 58%. I think that's wrong. I think it was worse. Venom: The Last Dance, 41%. Now, I'm going to tell you something that might be a little controversial. I think that the first Venom movie was fun. It wasn't great, but it was okay. It was fun. Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Venom Let There Be Carnage, I thought, was basically the same thing with a worse representation for a villain. Like, Carnage should have been cooler, and it just wasn't as interesting. Okay,
Yeah, and
like, cause
to me, this was one where I was telling you before, like being an avid Spider-Man reader, this is one that really hit me and kind of like pissed me off, kind of deal.
Yeah.
Because out of all these other villains that they will give a full-length feature movie to, Carnage is a huge big bad for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And to have like that missed opportunity and this entire, story arc and everything else that goes into Carnage, and this is some of the darkest Marvel writing that has come out of the comics, is with the Carnage series. To miss out on that just for this like funny kind of campy movie, I was like, no.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that for there to be one movie, I think it would have been okay, but the whole this is like both the best character to make a movie, like I'm talking about Venom, the best character to make a movie about, because it's just like this big, so cool character, and the worst movie to make a movie about without Spider-Man, because he is literally Spider-Man's powers absorbed by an alien, so it's literally Spider-Man. Evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think for the first one, it was fun. It was high octane action. The biggest thing that was cool is the development of the characters of Venom and Eddie coming together. And then Venom Let There Be Carnage just didn't have that, and they didn't make Carnage so cool, so you just didn't really have anything. Venom The Last Dance, I think, was better, and I gave it an above average. Honestly, I'm going to tell you guys the truth. I have early onset dementia, so I forget stuff. So I either gave it an above average or an average, because you had Venom. You basically, if you forget Venom The Let There Be Carnage and just go straight from Venom to Venom The Last Dance, then you have Eddie Brock developing as a what do they call it? The Annihilator, whatever they call themselves, basically Agent Venom. And then in Venom The Last Dance, you have that character facing, like in the first movie, they didn't face like a true like big moment where it's like, we've got to do this and we could die, but we're going to stand up and do the right thing kind of moment. But you did in Venom The Last Dance. So I think that was those two movies together would be kind of like, I think it's above a 40%. I would say at least average, possibly above average. Okay, I'm talking about just as a movie. Now, as an MCU comic, as a comic book guy, I like not so much comics, but like the characters in media, movies, video game stuff.
If you want to talk about Venom, he makes more sense because he does, become an anti-hero character in the Marvel comics. He's on different Avengers initiatives and things like that. So like Venom, if anybody, makes kind of more sense to try to make their own thing, or have like an anti-hero kind of movie deal going with it. That makes sense. Like I said, the complete just heresy was like, we're going to make a Venom and Carnage movie, and we aren't going to include Spider-Man, and there's nothing that remotely touches on the disturbing like psychological horror that exists within those comics.
Well, and the thing, so I think as a movie, they're like average to above average, and then as being, it's like if you had a creature that came to Earth and was an alien that was basically Venom but was not, and then this was the movie, I think these movies would be an average to above average, okay? But the fact that it's Venom without Spider-Man sucks and brings it down for people. My ratings are based off of separating those things. Like, I'm rating it as the movie and its own merit, okay? So that's where my ratings come from. But yeah, I mean, it sucks that there's no Spider-Man. It's also weird that they did this thing where, because Sony owns the rights, so I don't know why. Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man. I don't know why they wouldn't be able to make a movie. I think it would have been cool if they could have brought to fruition the connection they made with the MCU, where he sees Tom Holland and he licks the screen. He's like, that guy. And it would have been cool if they would have brought Venom to New York, had him fight Spider-Man or do something with Spider-Man. And then, like you said, he becomes an anti-hero. that was what I was going to say too, is that Sony was trying to do this Sinister Six thing, but all these guys are good. So how were you going to turn it into them going, hey, let's kill Spider-Man?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought they were going to use the Tom Holland Spider-Man that pulled in William Dafoe, and like that was going to be the Sinister Six, arc, and like everything was going to go off that. And to me, it felt like that movie should have even been split into two different movies and lengthened, because that's another one. They'll get a hold of these comic arcs, and they will take a comic arc that is, across multiple issues, across multiple characters, and runs for years, and they will condense it down to a 2-hour movie. And then they'll find arcs that, are maybe like a 10-issue run, and they will try to like expand that into an entire ideology that moves throughout the entire deal. Like Kang's a good example. Kang is not just like, he's not like the gigantic big bad of like going across multiple Marvel, series and spanning for years and years and years. It's a relatively short and small,
like he just shows up at one point and says, "Hey, Avengers, I'm going to fight you."
Well, he's mostly too a Fantastic Four villain, and so it's like, all right, okay, yeah, he was an Avengers villain. It exists, and like you have a small story about him, but he wasn't MCU level. Like, we're going to extend and make 12 movies about this person.
Yeah.
Like Thanos makes sense, right? But Kang,
right.
And then you're missing out on the whole Doctor Doom thing. You're just like, why is it that nobody has talked about probably the most recognizable villain in the MCU, and they're talking about the multiverse?
Comics,
all of this lines up. Yeah, all of this lines up with what you're doing, but you have the wrong bad guy.
Right. No, exactly. And and I agree. And this is the thing. Again, look at the MCU, and I think it's funny because this issue mirrors I think it's more of a modern movie making thing, because the Sonyverse basically has had the wrong villains too, being the main protagonists. So I'm trying to think of characters. Where you would be able to. So Venomite, we said, is a good one. Let's move into the next one real quick. So Morbius. Okay, and I'm gonna switch us back. I'm sorry, I was looking at Morbius is a 15%. I didn't even think about it, but I'll move us back here. Morbius is 15%. Now I'm gonna tell you, I gave this movie an average, and I'll tell you why I gave it an average. Because you have character writing that makes sense. Like, you have a guy, he's sick, he's trying to cure himself, he gets superpowers, and he fights another guy that also gets similar superpowers, and then the movie ends. I mean, it's not great. It's okay. It makes sense. There's not huge plot holes. There's not a bunch of controversial stuff. Is it super interesting? Not really. Okay.
And you have the issue of, like, everything that Jared Leto touches, he destroys.
Yeah, I know. Even people's lives, apparently, because he has a cult. Like, I don't know. No, but the thing is that what I'm trying to say is, like, if you think back to the era of, I'll tell you the truth, Iron Man was not some great giant action romp. I mean, it was basically this guy comes back from being kidnapped. He builds a suit to escape, comes home, improves the suit, finds out that his partner's a bad guy, and fights him, and that's the whole movie. It's not like some big complicated, and the action in that movie wasn't great either compared to the Avengers movies and stuff. I mean, he had a couple of fights, they showcased some cool stuff, but it wasn't like big huge thing. So I think of like Morbius compared to Iron Man. I know that's going to be controversial. I'm not saying that Iron Man isn't better. Iron Man is better, especially because it has a cooler character. But my point is
you're saying as a plot, like where you're moving from point A to point B, they're on a similar path. It's instead of being like Iron Man, Morbius is like walking in the gutter instead of actually walking on the sidewalk.
Exactly. No, exactly. Well, and I'm thinking, so that's Iron Man too, and that was a really good one. But then you think back, just think back to some of the generic movies we've gotten that are like generic superhero movies on the Sci-Fi Channel or whatever. And it's like, I mean, we didn't think that those movies were the worst movies ever. They were TV movies, whatever. Okay. That's Morbius. That's Morbius for me. It wasn't offensive to me. It was a character I wasn't so much interested in, but I went and saw it anyway. It was okay. And that's it. It was okay. I know that people were saying like, "Oh, it's the worst movie." I think there's this tendency for people to say it's either the greatest movie ever, and if it's not the greatest movie ever, it's the worst movie ever. And I just don't think Morbius was that. I think that people are just getting a little spoiled for one thing with the MCU, and I think that people are also getting intolerant of like people don't realize there can be mid movies.
I'll agree with them because to me I felt like at the point like that's the other thing that I kind of talk about, like as much as movies cost nowadays, how much it costs to go see a movie, and what you have to pay, and most people aren't seeing it by themselves. So you got a family, average person has 2 kids, wife, 2 kids, and then maybe you bring in other family members too. At the end of the day, you're spending anywhere from like $150 to $250 to go see a movie, and for that kind of price point, to have something that, like you're saying, is mid is almost like offensive. And so that's, to me, that's why you have these extreme backlashes from people, because they feel like, I want my money back after I wasted my time having to go do that.
So I would say, and I agree. I would say probably theater release was the wrong idea. Well, Blue Beetle came out, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't see Blue Beetle, so I'm not reviewing Blue Beetle right now. But I am gonna say people said that movie was like, oh, it was okay.
Yeah, it was campy, it was kind of fun, and it was okay.
I think that Morbius was kind of the same idea, except it just wasn't quite as fun. So I think it would be an average movie, but like on the low end of average. Especially because one thing you got to realize is that the CGI wasn't bad either. Like I said, the plot points actually make sense. And there wasn't characters who all of a sudden you stopped and went, why did that guy do that?
The plot points make sense if you're not watching it from that comic perspective. Because if you go into the comic perspective, you're watching this and you're just like, this is complete trash. Like, they're not even following and
and I agree with you. I do agree. Yeah.
That's another problem that you get in with these things too, is it's like they don't understand the common business, device here, that we already have swaths of loyal fans that have read these stories and enjoy these stories. Morbius is in, the Spider-Man deal. It's a pretty decent arc, and it's, interesting, storyline. So you already have these people. The other people, the general public that haven't, engaged with the comics and aren't nerds about it, like, if you just tell the story the nerds like already, they'll enjoy what you put up there. And like you said, it'll be average or, this and that. But when you're just like, nope, not only are we just going to crap all over, the source material, but we're not even going to try to do something that makes sense business-wise and all these other things. Yeah, of course, you're going to throw out this stuff, and then, like I said, people are going to feel like affronted afterwards. Like, what is this?
I think that a big problem right now is that culturally, a lot of people are just against fan service. So a moment where they would have done things. So I'm not like a huge Morbius guy. I'm just saying like when Captain America picked up Thor's hammer and Thor went, yeah, that's kind of a fan service thing, right?
Yeah.
But that people consider that really cool. But a lot of people culturally right now are like, fan service, it's just full of nostalgia and fan service. But actually, that's what audiences want. So if you would have had Morbius do a thing that would have been Morbius, like this is Morbius from the comics doing that, people would have looked and basically filled the movie with that. I think that people, it may not have been a great movie, but people would have said, it had that little moment. It's kind of, but they just didn't have it. There was not anything interesting, and I think that's the problem, really, with a lot of these movies. So, kind of getting transitioning over. If you're okay, we'll kind of transitioning over here to the next thing. Let's check this out. Madam Web. This is another case. So I think that Morbius is a case of bad character, and then you don't do anything interesting with the character. I think that this movie was a case of bad character, and then you do worse than nothing. Like, this movie was offensive. So it's got an 11%. This is my point. Morbius got like a 15%. Madam Web got an 11%. Now, I think that Madam Web is like, you know, when you hit rock bottom and then you get a drill and drill deeper? That's Madam Web. Morbius was like, Morbius is like that kid in class that just doesn't perform.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I did? I didn't put you up. Morbius. Okay, yeah. So I'll switch back over though. Morbius is that kid in class that comes to class and just doesn't perform, and so everybody thinks he's stupid, but he still passes. He's like, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah.
This Madam Web comes to class and like takes a crap on the teacher's desk, and everybody's like, "Wow, you're an idiot."
Yeah.
Yes. So so this movie, I think it was dumb. The idea of Madam Web is a character. It would be like having a movie about the One Above All. It's just not interesting because
it's another really big missed opportunity type thing. It's another one where we're going to crap on the source material. Madam Web is actually integral in the Spider-Man universe. There's actually a story there that could
but a
have
side
a
character.
a solo character movie and make sense. And to pull into what's going on the MCU, to pull into what's going on their animated Spider-Verse movies, to pull into, you know, the Sony Spider-Man deals that are going on. Like, this thing actually would have been something that could have been pulled off. Like,
but she should have been. I think that she should have been a side character. The movie shouldn't have been about her. Like, you could have even called it Spider-Man and Madam Web, or Spider-Man something, and then Madam Web. It would be like making. Do you remember the Blade movies? It'd be like making a movie about Whistler. Like, Whistler is a guide to Blade. Whistler is a character that helps Blade. Madam Web is a character that Spider-Man interacts with, but she doesn't do anything. And so to make a movie about, like, with her involved and kind of expanding the lore with her involved would be Spider-Man doing a thing and interacting with her, and like you're saying, and it would expand the universe. That's what I mean about One Above All. It's like, you can't make a movie about him because he's a character that is designed to kind of peek his head in every once in a while and then leave. So that's where I think, so that's why I'm saying these ideas and some of the things, and a lot of it, I'll tell you the truth, this was a girl power movie, or at least, and it was like, why? Like, I don't have a problem with girl empowerment or whatever. We talked about that with the Avengers, right? But you don't need to push, and you said it exactly right. You don't need to push that so hard that you end up like, it's like when they say, you know, I'm going to propose to my girlfriend, and they say, like, if you find yourself attaching the ring to a dog's collar, stop. Okay, so if you're like so girl power empowerment, like, in your mind, if you find yourself making a Madam Web movie, stop. Okay. Yeah.
And again, there are specific female arcs in Marvel and, you know, all of these other things that you could make movies about them, that Sony has the rights to, that, you know, even in Marvel world, there are people. Black Cat's a character. Black Cat's a huge, like, you know, deal.
Huge part.
Again, a cat, like the Catwoman movie with Halle Berry and stuff like that. Like, like you said, it was a mid movie. It didn't do crazy at the freaking box office, but it still made money, and people were still like, you know, okay, sexy Halle Berry.
Yeah, nothing special.
Whatever. Yeah, you know, and you have female characters that you could do strong leads, and you could make strong female empowerment movies using this universe and using
but not ones that are 80-year-old women in not 80-year-old blind women in a wheelchair.
And then turning them into whatever the fuck that was.
Or again, Morbius. Like again, so you like it's the same idea. Like you can have a character make a mid movie. Everybody else say, "Oh, it was a mid movie, fine." But if you make it from a villain character, that how are you gonna? Yeah. So I just don't think that worked. I think that this one, Madam Web, was definitely offensive. And it just made like this. I think this was the point where people were like, "Okay, Venom will be fine. We'll go see Venom. That looks interesting," because other people actually did like the Venom movies.
I even had my daughter. You know, we watched the Madam Web together, and like through the whole time, I think she audibly at least like twice was like, "Gross," you know, just like.
Well, and the thing too is that it was boring. That's the thing. It was boring. Like Captain Marvel, when the Marvels came out, the thing that I criticized it for, it was like, you do have a character who has the potential to do some interesting stuff and be cool, as long as you take away this whole idea of Brie Larson, who's a great actress, Brie Larson being like a jerk through the whole movie. You could do something here. And what did they do? They didn't do anything interesting. You have characters who aren't even capable of doing anything interesting, and you're trying to make movies about them. And so I think that after Madam Web, people said, look, I'm going to go see Venom, and then any other Sonyverse movies I'm not going to see anymore. So which brings us to Kraven. So Kraven the Hunter, this movie, I'll tell you, I know, so this movie, I'm not so much of a Kraven guy. Again, like you said, he's such a small part of the comics. There is nothing in this movie that makes Kraven the Hunter. He doesn't have the same abilities as Kraven the Hunter. He's the same idea. He's a hunter. And that's it. In the comics, he uses potions to make himself like strong and everything. Here, he gets bit by a lion, and then somebody gives him a serum that basically makes him Lion Man. So you had bit by a bat, get bit by bat powers, Morbius, and then you had get bit by a lion powers, Kraven.
I will say, at least that is a common Spider-Man type theme going on. You have a lot of villains and things like that are like affected by some sort of animal in some way, and then they take on those attributes in
I like
sci-fi campy ways.
Octopus, Rhino, Black Cat, Scorpion. Yeah, I thought Scorpion was such a cool character. But here, we'll look at this just real quick. So it's got a 15% on IMDb. I know that all of my stuff is different, guys, by the way. We've switched a couple of times now, but this is like my live stream background. Next time I'll fix it for when we do with people like this. But 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm going to tell you, I'm working on the review right now. I'm about to do a review over the holidays, and so we'll give me some time, and I'll we'll see how it when it gets out. But I would say this is another mid movie. Like, if this wasn't Kraven the Hunter, it would basically just be a story of a guy who is a vigilante who hunts bad guys, and then eventually those bad guys come for him. Kraven has.
And the source material is far much more interesting. It's based off that famous short story in the 20s, The Most Dangerous Game, and there's psychological thrilling things involved with that short story about power and wealth and authority, and where once you reach your limits, what level are you going to go to keep pushing yourself, and they basically reinterpreted this whole short story into the comics with Kraven and this character. He gets to the point where he's killed and hunted everything, and so now he wants to hunt superheroes and supervillains because that's the next fix he needs to excite himself. That's an interesting story, not this weird, I get bit by a lion and now I'm going to go hunt poachers and be this weird anti-hero guy. No, Kraven is evil person.
So that's the thing is my understanding of the character, not being a guy who's like a big fan, is that he's not exactly evil. He just wants to kill Spider-Man because Spider-Man is a great hunt.
He is evil. He is full on, he is psychologically disturbed. And like I said, it does go off that whole thing of he was such a good hunter, and he was pushed to his limits to, become that. And then he was also abused by his father and all this kind of stuff.
So that the abuse of the father is in here. The father
Oh,
abuse
okay.
is in here,
Yeah.
and him being a great hunter, basically through the. Okay, I don't want to. I just want to
But it's that
give you
idea
some.
of like I hit my limits, and where do I
Yeah.
go from there? And now I have all the like he was really powerful and wealthy, so he's like, okay, once I hit that limit, well, now I'm bored. What do I do? Oh, I'm gonna hunt supervillains. Oh, why not even hunt
Yeah.
superheroes? You know, and it's all about killing these things to get a fix for himself in the comics. You know, like that's what he wants is this adrenaline and this rush and this fix.
So this movie was basically Craven. His dad is a hunter and a mob boss, some kind of in some fashion. They don't get into the details, which is fine. I think that's fine, not getting into those details. But he gets bit by the lion and then runs away from home and becomes basically Super Lion Man, which is fine. Okay, I'm with you so far. But then he never becomes a hunter. He's never actually a hunter. He's called the hunter, but basically all he does is he goes around and kills supervillains. He does not hunt extreme game and then, like you're saying, progress from I've already killed rhinoceros and the yeti and or whatever creepy weird animal, or even mythological animals that might exist in the comic books. He just goes from, for no reason, he just says, I'm just going to be a vigilante that kills. He basically is like a Punisher. He's like the Punisher.
Yeah.
And he just goes around. Okay. And then what happens in the movie is that his family gets involved, where like his brother that he loves is threatened. So then that's where he has to actually fight specific people.
And it's another crazy thing for me, because in the comics, that's another problem with him, is that it's also telling this story of like the hurt people, and you see Craven enacting the same abuse on his family, on his brother, his children, and all of that. You know, the same thing.
So
that
none of
happened
that.
to his father. It's
so let me just ask you, what do you think of this idea of making villains into good guys? Like I'm not even talking about super villains. I mean Maleficent. Maleficent was one. What's another one? Where they try to take like the bad. Oh, Cruella.
Cruella, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that
there are points where it makes sense, and there are people that have done it really well. If I get extremely campy and corny, the Incredibles, the first Incredibles movie, did it really well. You know, giving this whole Sinestro kid, who was just, tossed aside by Mr. Incredible and made to feel powerless, and then, becomes a villain, and you really feel for him, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
That, if you latch on to like that idea, and we're trying to explain this idea of like, no one is evil in a vacuum. No one is bad in a vacuum. There are always mitigating circumstances behind them. And if your evil character is not like on the level of being whatchamacallit, like if you kind of think of it in a D&D form, like a lawful evil, just like evil.
Yeah.
Like we're if we have like
Chaotic
the devil
evil,
on if we have like the devil on one end, and like, just here we go, like you said, chaotic evil on the other. If we're somewhere in the middle to the end, we can do that with an evil character and give them some sort of like reason and stuff. If they're full on just crazy evil, you have to tell that story that way for people to make it work in their minds.
Because it ruins the character.
Yeah, like American Psycho is a great movie, but no one has any like question that the main character in that movie is full on evil.
Yeah, you would never be able to write a movie where that guy, it turns out, well, so the thing is that, so in these movies, well, so I agree with you about the idea of Sinestro. Syndrome. Yeah, I agree with you about the idea of Syndrome, but the problem with it is that he was still evil at the end of the movie. In Morbius is the good guy at the end of the movie. And in Craven, he never was a bad guy in the movie.
Yeah.
Maleficent was never a bad guy in the movie. Cruella was never a bad guy in the movie. It's basically rewriting the character and
with,
saying, what if they were actually good? Yeah, go on.
Well, when you're dealing with Disney, especially Disney is one of those that, especially coming out in the 30s through the 60s, everything is definitely in a black and white,
Right.
mentality of things. So going back and giving someone some sort of reason for why they became who they were and what they did, okay, that might be kind of fun. Like Wicked's a decent movie, and like having all that kind of stuff behind it is interesting. But again, at the end of the day, like these people aren't, like lawfully just like, oh my God, disturbingly evil people.
Yeah.
Doing this with a character that has no redemptive qualities, we don't want to see that story. It's kind of like if someone were to tell the story of like Saddam Hussein and then be like try to
But he was good, actually. Well, Hitler actually. No.
Yeah. There's a level to that. And with Disney, we understand that we bought into these this idea with these characters that there's just good and bad. And so when you tell these interesting stories about the villains, it doesn't just say something about the villains, it also says a lot about the heroes of those things too. Like Wicked says a lot about, the Glindola, right? The white the good witch and stuff like that.
Yeah, because Alphaba
like,
and Gwen, I don't know what her name is. Galinda.
Yeah.
There you go, Galinda.
Yeah, Galinda. Yeah. So you're like, okay, like I get it. Like that makes some sense, and we can do that. But not every villain needs like an explainer behind them.
Well, it's not just, but here, and even in Maleficent, I'll say these aren't just characters saying this is why they turned evil. This is this is a rewrite. This isn't the same character. This isn't Craven was damaged here a little bit and he dealt with some family stuff, but actually it didn't get so bad where he had these bad characteristics. There's a guy whose name is Craven. Mm-hmm. He has some of the same ideas around what his character is as Craven, but he is nowhere near the same character.
Yeah.
It's like a parody. It's like a good parody, like a parody of the character being a good guy. And he never even become a hunter.
In this case, it seems more like offensive because you take away to the ability to tell those kind of stories and have those kind of like ideas of abuse, of psychological issues, and like all these other things that are attached to that story, and like heritage of passing down generational trauma, all kinds of other stuff. Like you miss out on all of that just by trying to like revamp this character into something that it clearly isn't.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, so basically, that's the Sonyverse guys. So they actually, so there's rumors. So just kind of transitioning, and we're gonna wrap up here in just a second. I think if but it was considered like they were thinking about doing a Mysterio movie. I could see the idea, but I don't know how you would I don't know how you would flesh that out. Without making without making a parody where it's not the same character. I don't know how you flesh it out and show him being the good guy, because I mean he kills people. Like he gets mad at the world and kills people. So
and again, you're taking away from the whole crux of the character and everything, because if I remember correctly, there's a Spider-Man version where Mysterio is actually like the person that freaking killed Ben. Like he's that person. And you have all of these like things tied up into this, and Mysterio like attacking Spider-Man, and it has to do with his guilt and repression and like all these like things that go into this. But why? Okay, why do you have to make it a solo Mysterio movie? Spider-Man exists. These stories exist. Take them and use them.
Right. Well, I think that the Spider-Man movie we got with Mysterio was much better than the idea, because he even was shown to be maybe sympathetic, little, at least a little bit. But yeah, I think that would have been that was much better than what it would have been to make a movie where it's like, no, we're going to say that he actually became a superhero rather than becoming a Spider-Man villain. Yeah. So just kind of wrapping it up here and talking about these things though. So I think basically what we're having is kind of I don't think it's superhero fatigue. I don't. I think that if you write good movies, if you write a good Western, people will go see it. If you write a good superhero movie, people will go see it. If you write a good, whatever, people will go see it and it'll be good, okay? So I don't think it's fatigue, but I think that we just are having this downward trend of how they're, first of all, what characters they're selecting, okay? Stacked on top of lack of subtlety, and you're pushing it so far that you lose the story. Mm-hmm. You have bad writing in general and betraying the characters. So not only did you pick the wrong character to make a superhero movie, a hero movie about, you betrayed the character in the process. So then you have to. So I think that it's like these people are asking themselves, well, what if Craven was a good guy? Well, I'll tell you what if Craven was a good guy. He wouldn't be an interesting guy. That's what if. So, yeah. I think so. People are saying that it's over, and I don't know. I mean, I want to see maybe they can make some stuff with Spider-Man. It'd be good to make some more.
The Spider-Verse movies were great. That's one of the few animated movies that I went to the theater to go watch.
Yeah.
And I didn't watch the first one in theaters. I watched it in streaming, and I was so impressed by it that the next time when it came out in theaters, I went to go see it in theaters.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and I'll tell you, I think, so we need, even if Tom Holland kept doing Spider-Man movies, I think that's where we need to focus. You know what they need to do is they need to forget the MCU, basically. Because there was that connection with the MCU, I think they could have made work with Venom, but I think that they're basically done. Sony, I think, is trying to not work with Marvel anymore, which is fine. Yeah. But they should I think it would be cool to see, like, a movie with, what's his name? Tobey Maguire. And I'm telling you, like Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire do a team up. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just go crazy, but still, Spider-Man. We want Spider-Man. Make Spider-Man. Yeah. Stop making. You could even probably bring some of these characters back. And you know what you could do? They could even have like meta humor where they bring in Morbius to fight Spider-Man, and then Spider-Man makes fun of him, like, "You're not the hero of this story, you idiot," and then get him or whatever. I think that would be really cool, but I hope that the movie industry.
I think we're about to see a change. I think we're about to see a changing of the guard too. That's another big thing. Is I don't know. They've
lost too much money.
I don't know if you've seen it yet. The Superman trailer, the Superman movie trailer.
I did. It's coming out next week. Watch for the trailers, guys. I did trailers with Mike. Yeah. Yesterday.
I have not been so hyped. So.
Yes.
And I'm like, it's just a trailer. The trailer already has all the elements of what you need, and you're like, I understand this.
They
story
even made
by watching this.
They made Crypto the dog work.
Yeah.
That seems like something that would be really dumb and kind of, like you said, silly, but actually they made it work. I loved that he's laying there and he goes, and his dog comes running. It's so cool. But yeah, I think I'm
so excited too because I was this close to being in the movie as an extra.
Oh, really?
I was in Cleveland for a conference when they were recording and they're doing the bridge scene.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think that they've lost enough money now to have learned we need to change things around, so I hope that happens. But yeah, so this has been kind of our discussion about the movies that are coming out as far as the MCU and superhero movies and a couple of other things. Hope the Spider-Verse has collapsed in on itself, and I think that we're at a point now where it's been like Sony has been back here. Sony's been back here. Marvel was in the front, and DC was trailing way behind, but still the second. And now Marvel, it's kind of like Steam, how they say that all Steam has to do to win. All that Valve, the production company, or the game development company, has to do to win against its competitors is do nothing. Because its competitors keep screwing up. So DC has literally just been waiting for the MCU to totally crap itself out, and it's done that now. And so now DC's goes, hey, let's step on the gas. And like you're saying, changing of the guard, I think that's definitely one changing of the guard where DC's going to take over now. And I'm here for it. I'm waiting for it, and I hope that does happen. So listen, give yourself another shout out. I want to say go check out Tales of Nihilism, but Salty Skipper Stephen Russell here, go one more time, tell us about it, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah. So again, my memoir about my deployment to Bakuba, Iraq in 2006 with First Cavs, called Troublemakers, the Greatest Dog and Pony Show in Iraq. And I'm also the artist and story concept writer for Tales of Nihilism on Global Comics.
All right, awesome. Go check that out. And then what I'm going to start doing too, I just want to let you know, we're going to start sharing that stuff on Facebook. I never even thought about it. It never crossed my mind. When you tag me in things, I'm gonna be sharing it on my page as well now.
Oh yeah.
So check it out, guys. Check out Tales of Nihilism. So you've got an event coming up though, right?
No, not right now.
Your last comic is coming out.
Yeah, well, it's actually out right now. So we've released the final issue.
Okay.
Yeah, the last issue of our first main series, The Ballad of Philip Kirshner. It's about a normal guy, lives in a world full of superheroes and villains, and just shows how crazy it would actually be to be a normal guy. Yeah.
All right. Well, check all that stuff out, guys. So this has kind of been our thoughts. Like, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to leave a comment, share the video. It really does help out. Watch for the cash giveaways. Watch for the MAARs Summit coming in January. We're doing some things to have that be a little bit more structured, so we've got to make it flow a little bit easier for everybody. And so this has been great. Thank you for coming. I do want to thank the audience. So first, I want to thank Stephen Russell. Great to have you here, buddy. And also just say as we leave out here, guys, thank you for watching. God bless you all, and have a good day. Don't forget to check me out on Twitch and join the Discord where you can voice chat with me while I live stream, and you won't be recorded or anything on YouTube and Twitch, so that's pretty cool. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. If you like to read, you can see my after action reports on my blog. And if you are interested, you can get some merch from my spring store. The links for everything are in the description below.